All righty, we are at 10:46. Let's go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for being here. Today we will be seeing a talk by Ronnie and Eddie. Give me 1 second while I try to open up things on my side. Apologies for the technical difficulties today. All right, again, hello everyone. Thank you for joining DataCon LA 2020. Welcome to the Data for Good track, and soon we will be listening to Rapid Prototyping Data Platforms, a Data for Good case study with the Clean Air Coalition and Partners session with Ronnie Kim and Eddie Park. I'm Noelle Graham, your host, and our co-host today is Eric Minna. We will be moderating the chat and Q&A for you during this session. Ronnie Kim is an innovation and design strategist based in Los Angeles. Her work spans 25 years of partnerships with organizations, creatives, and technologists. Her experience using human-centered design approaches has helped numerous organizations understand how to best solve problems strategically to generate value for their organization. Ronnie's most recent work focuses on envisioning and storytelling through human lenses to help clients imagine new possibilities for their future. She has led future forward initiatives with clients including Autodesk, Ford, Nike, and VF, among others. As an educator, her background includes lectureships and visiting artist critic roles at the Art Center College of Design, California Institute of the Arts, Cal State Long Beach, Otis College of Art and Design, SciArc, UCLA, and USC. Eddie is a solutions engineer and product manager with 14 plus years of experience in IoT, software, medical imaging, mobile games, and aerospace. Currently, he's at Vertigris, working on smart metering to optimize energy consumption using artificial intelligence for data centers and hospitality. Without further ado, I'll hand over the speakers. Thanks for being here, Ronnie and Eddie.
Hi, everybody. Hopefully you can all see me here. And Eddie, I don't think your camera is on, nor are you sharing screen yet. So while you're getting that up, I'm going to just go ahead and get started. I do want to make sure that Eddie's in the room though. Sorry, guys.
There is an Eddie without a last name. Was that probably him?
That may be him. Eddie, do you mind turning on your camera and just letting us know that you're there? Eddie, are you there?
It looked like we lost him. I'll go see if I can retrieve him back.
Okay. I'll go ahead and get started. Eddie was actually going to run our slideshow, so I'll see if I can do both of those things while we're looking for him. So how many of you had a great idea and can inherently feel its value, but you've had trouble either getting beyond the idea stage or making it into something tangible? And that when you can't do that, that in turn makes it much harder to get buy-in and or get the support that you need. And so I want to thank Noelle for that great introduction. I just wanted to start with those questions because those are the kinds of questions that I think a lot of us deal with every day when we're working in organizations. And I'm the founder of Collective Future, and we're a design and innovation strategy studio. And oh, there's Eddie. Okay, I think he's probably just getting caught up. So I'm joined here with Eddie, and we'll see him on camera here in a minute. And we're going to share with you a case study on how you can get from an idea to a prototype in just 10 days. And it's using a process that we call Future Today Rapid Sprints. And we were both volunteers on it. There you are. Hi. And we were both volunteers on a Data for Good project called the Clean Air Project. And if you were listening to the keynote session earlier today, where there were different D4G advisors who were speaking about the projects that we're working on, you will have heard a little bit about what this project was about, but if you weren't there, no worries. We're gonna take you through it in some detail during the session. So for this D4G, yeah, we can just start with the first screen, Eddie. So for this rapid sprint that we led for D4G, I was the facilitator and Eddie was the product lead. And we can go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, I'm the founder of Collective Future. And what we do there is we help organizations imagine what's possible in the near future. if you could go back one slide, Eddie.
Advancing on their own?
Sorry?
Oh, I think it's advancing on its own, sorry.
Oh, okay. You might want to just put it on play, and I think it will allow you to just click through. And so what we do at our studio is we use future visioning and design and storytelling tools and techniques. And what we're going to share with you today is an example of one of those tools and techniques. And the rapid sprint that we use is great not only for new ideas and things that you might not even be sure about whether or not it works, but it's also great for projects that you have already going in your pipeline. Before I get into that, I'm just going to speak really quickly about what D4G is for those of you who might not be familiar with it. I'm on the advisory board as well, and it is a nonprofit that was started in 2019, so it's very young nonprofit, and it was founded by the same person who founded DataCon, Subhash D'Souza. And what we do there is we draw on leaders from both public and private sectors and work on initiatives to harness the power of data to create positive social impact in our communities. And we also work with and need volunteers to help their organization achieve all of its goals. And so if you feel like you might be one of those people, definitely please reach out to us, because it definitely takes a small army or a village to keep the thing going. All right. So let's get into the rapid sprint itself and some of the challenges and problems that we were able to solve. It would be helpful if we had the presentation up because I'm going to speak to a couple of images. Yeah, and you don't have to run it in, well, let's see that. So
the play is making in advance. Sorry if I hit play right here. Is it just me?
Yeah, that's fine. Let's just go to slide 4. Yeah, and if you wouldn't mind just closing out the format on the top right so that people can see the images a little bit more. Yeah, right there.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Go up, to the right, to the right. Yeah, click on that format button.
Right here?
Click on the, yeah.
Oh.
There we go. Okay. So I'm guessing if you who are in the audience if you live in LA, this picture isn't going to be anything new for you, right? It's a picture of our infamous smog. And although it's gotten better over the past few years, our air quality is still a prevailing problem. We breathe this air day in and day out. Sometimes it's more visible than others. I recently downloaded an AQI app. I don't know if you guys have done the same thing. I didn't even really know that there was such a tool before. But if you look at the next slide, you know, this summer it got a lot worse with all of the, Eddie, if we go to the next slide, yeah, it's gotten a lot worse with all of the fires in the region, right? And so then it definitely, I mean, it was like we were in this red haze. And if we go to the next slide, it's completely compounded by the fact that LA is typically sunny and dry year round. And this really leads to factors that have health effects. And so we see increasing rates of asthma, different kinds of lung disease. And especially right now in the midst of our pandemic, we're all wearing masks. And it's actually, you know, if you have one that's sort of air quality sensitive, it's doing double duty. And so this is the context in which the Coalition for Clean Air came to D4G to ask us to help them with a problem that they were having in gathering the data they needed to do their work effectively. And just very quickly, so you guys know, the Coalition for Clean Air is an advocacy group that's based in Los Angeles. Their mission is to protect public health, to improve air quality, and to prevent climate change. And they were founded in 1971, and they are the only organization, it's California's only statewide organization that's working exclusively on air quality issues. And so let's talk a little bit about the specific data challenge that they were facing. Eddie, do you want to speak to that a little bit? Oh yeah, and so here you can see examples of some air quality sensors that we were working with. Do you want to speak to that, Eddie?
Yeah, so they had a really unique problem, and they had deployed 200 clean air sensors throughout the Los Angeles area. And they were, one, losing track, and two, the data was really inaccessible because it was available through the manufacturer's website, but wasn't necessarily intended to be used for research purposes in the way it was displayed. And so we were tasked with helping them wrangle all of this data from 200 independent sensors throughout residential areas, industrial areas, and being able to make sure that they could download the data effectively and be able to put it in a format that's really conducive for doing the type of spatial analysis that they were doing. And so what they had was a web interface from the manufacturer, and they could sort of see all of the sensors in the Los Angeles area. But the way that they were sort of able to do it was to go through a web interface, pick individual sensors from a map, note the IDs, the unique IDs of each sensor, and then go through a different web interface to download independent CSVs for each sensor, and then have to manually combine them into one, manually change formats from volumetric to the type of AQI that you might see on the news, and do their research on that, changing format several times, and then manually condensing 400 spreadsheets into a single spreadsheet. So you can do the typical time series graphs and heat maps that they're interested in seeing. And so our task initially was to really understand the problem space and get to the solution that they needed so they could spend the 90% of their time doing research as opposed to the 90% of the time collecting data, cleaning data, and put it into a format that they could work with.
Awesome. And actually, if you could play the slide, because there's an animation in here. And so what we did is, you can hear from what Eddie just described, we had a sense of what the problem and what the solution may be. But because it had only been talked about in the abstract, we needed a way to get to the actual solution itself. And so we decided to apply the Future Today Rapid Sprint approach to the problem. And it seemed like a perfect candidate because, as I just mentioned, CCA had an idea, and they had an idea of what they thought this final solution could look like, but they also didn't have a lot of time and they didn't have a lot of budget to realize what they thought the potential solution would be. And so I'm going to spend a minute talking about what a rapid sprint is. Rapid sprints are, what we did is we developed this process of rapid design sprints based on an open source process that was developed by Google Ventures, and they call theirs a design sprint. So it's very similar naming. And what it is it's an approach that allows us to build the future today by getting us, sorry, if you could go. Well, actually, it doesn't matter. I'll just talk you through it. So it's an approach that allows us to start building the future today. As I mentioned, you go from an idea to a tested prototype in 10 days, and we're actually working on condensing that down to 6. And it helps teams to work through ideas really more efficiently and quickly by having a very sort of structured framework through which the team is working through over the course of those 10 days. And it's designed so that you don't really need, nobody on the team needs any formal training in design or development. And it's roughly about 2 to 5 hours a day for each person and for each individual on the team to be working on this process. And it's during normal business hours. So it's not super disruptive. It's not like a crazy hackathon where you're spending 48 hours trying to come up with a solution. It's actually very civilized, and I think it's super fun. But Eddie, maybe you can speak to that, what your experience was like working on it.
It was incredibly fun, and the amount of fun is directly related to the amount of work it was, and the fact that it was time boxed made sure the time that we spent was efficient. And the best part was that you always made sure that you had something tangible at the end of each day that you could look back on to motivate you to work on the next step of the process.
Yeah, it sounded like a lot of people, yeah, exactly for those reasons, because it was actually it's like organized chaos. And so here you're seeing an image of the volunteers who were part of our team, and they were made up of data scientists, of designers and engineers. and they had varying levels of experience. So a lot of them were actually recent students. We did have professionals who were on the project, and it, you know, in the end, it kind of leveled out in terms of what each person brought to the table. And we're going to look at why in just a second. Over the 10 days, I just want to talk a little bit about the structure of it. On the next slide, the team worked over Zoom and on Miro. And we had as we mentioned earlier, these time box exercises that helped the team itself gain alignment as we were working through the concepting and the creative problem solving phases. And part of the goal really was just to get the collective creative brains together to develop solutions and validate which ones are the best ones as we're moving forward, and then getting it revalidated by actual users who are testing the solution at the end of the project. And as the facilitators, really, we guided everyone through the process. So all anyone had to do was show up and participate in their, you know, in their portions during the day. And that's kind of how we got through the 10 days. There's some basic principles about how the sprints are run. And so those principles are that it's more important to get started than it is to be 100% right. And so we just wanted to generate as many ideas as we can to create the prototype and test it so that we could learn to make decisions faster. The tangible results, the other principle is that tangible results are better than discussion, right? Because you, as you've probably all experienced, you could sit in a room and talk for hours or days about something and kind of debate why something is right or wrong. But when you have something and really reach no resolution, but when you have something in front of you, it's so much easier to point to why something might be right or wrong and figure out what the next step, what the next stage is. And as I mentioned, you don't have to be a designer or an artist or anything like that. We're going to look at some of the ideas that people came up with. A lot of data scientists who proved to be incredibly creative, which was an amazing thing to see. And we also use the principle of yes and. So it's very much about building on each other's ideas as opposed to being too critical from the beginning. And that doesn't mean that you can't disagree. It just means that we're creating a really generative, productive space. And what Eddie is showing you here is an example of what our Miro board looked like before we started the process. And then if you go to the next screen, you'll see what it looked like after the 10 days. And so you can see there was lots of activity that happened on over the course of that time. And Miro, if you're not familiar with it, it's a collaborative shared whiteboard space. And so it's like this infinite whiteboard. And because our entire session was held remotely, we use Zoom, Miro, and Slack as our primary tools. And Miro is really just a way to also capture all of the ideas while also stepping through all of the work that was done. And so I'm actually just going to share my screen here so that you guys can see what Miro looked like. And I'm going to dive into some of those different sections. Okay, so this is what the whiteboard looked like after we were done with the entire session. It has a fairly easy interface. It takes about half an hour, maybe 20 minutes, just getting into it and learning how the interface works. And so I'm just zooming into a particular session. And so you can see here, this is what our schedule looked like, right? So every day we had very specific goals that we were trying to achieve. And within each of those days, we had a very specific time boxed session. So you can see, okay, on day one, we only spent 2.5 hours. We had a kickoff, we distilled visions, we had a break, and then we prioritized vision surveys and themes. And so every day we stepped through this in a very specific format. And so what's interesting is we have both time that we worked online together and also time that we worked offline separately and then would come back together. And we also had different slots for our stakeholder to participate. And actually her participation was fairly limited. And we're gonna hear from her a little bit in a few moments towards the end of this presentation. And So there are sort of 4 main activities that you go through during a sprint session. And so the first one is really identifying the vision and goals. And that helps get determined by the main stakeholders, really the decision maker who is ultimately going to say yes or no, and provide the critical feedback that's needed to get the project going. We do expert interviews. And so we had a couple of people come who were really one of our experts was Tim Dye. He works with the EPA and on numerous clean air projects. And so he really came and helped us to fast track our understanding of the space and what he's observed as working and not working. And we had a couple of other experts come. We also did a really actually like a quick and dirty competitive analysis. We created user personas and journeys, as you can see here. And out of that, we identified a number of features. We uncovered a number of features that we hadn't really been thinking about initially. And then we synthesized all of that information. So that was for the first 3 days. And then for the next couple of days, what we did is we went through a concept sketching phase where basically everyone took all of the ideas and learnings and started to draft up. Whoops, it's going too fast here. Let me zoom back out. Started to draft out their ideas. And I just want to zoom in because I want you to see how amazing some of these sketches are, but also the wide variety, right? So there's some people that just kind of went with mostly text and arrows. There were other people that were doing, more sort of pencil sketching. And really any of those approaches worked. And when you look at the breadth of how much we were able to create, these are all different components. These are different modules for dealing with the data. A heat map was a really big part of the project. And so thinking about different ways to implement a heat map, given the data sources that we have. And ultimately, we ended up with our first prototype here. And so this is I think the screen is just loading. This is sort of what the interface looked like for our very first version. Miro gets a little bit weird about loading images. So if you I think it will load this left side in a moment. We ultimately created these initial interface designs and then moved that over to Figma, which is a prototyping tool where we created a clickable prototype. Okay, maybe that's not going to load for you. I'll just go on to the next screen. And you can see what the clickable prototype, effectively what all of the different features and modules were that we created. And so in this instance, we had a map, which was a key part of the interface. And I should mention that we were really working towards creating a dashboard. As Eddie mentioned earlier, our stakeholder was gathering data individually from 200 different sensors across Los Angeles and downloading 200 different Excel spreadsheets that she was then manually trying to put together in a way that she could start to understand what the different findings were or what the meanings were around. For example, she wanted to understand how does air quality compare on the weekdays versus on the weekends, or during certain kinds of holidays like 4th of July, or based on location, if something is near a freeway versus near Griffith Park. But she just had a lot of it was really difficult for her to do because, as you can imagine, that's not really the best way to deal with data. And so the dashboard was our solution to that. And so in the clickable prototype, we were able to get users and the stakeholders to really try working through the ideas that we had. And even though PurpleAir actually had a similar kind of interface, because we saw what that looked like earlier, for some reason, they don't have a solution for aggregating all that data, right? And having a reporting tool. So this is just the first step in a series of phases that we're going to be going through. The first stage was just to get the concept really solidified and understand what the interface and what the workflow should be like. And then the next phase of it will be to actually do the development and to create all, to connect all the APIs and do all the programming and scripting on the back end so that the reporting can actually work and make sense. And then there's also a number of, work that needs to be done in terms of setting up the hosting and the backend and all of the data storage that will go with this. And so this was our first attempt. And then I think we're kind of running close to time. So I'm not going to take you through the clickable prototype itself, but if anyone's interested, just feel free to reach out. I'm happy to take you through it sort of individually. And then when we did the user testing, this is us capturing all of the feedback, and then we do a lot of voting in this process. So really identifying what are the most critical needs that we need to address within the couple of days that we have left. And then here you can see, let's see. Yeah, so then here you can see, let me see if I can get over to the screen, sort of what the final outcome looked like. And again, this is very drafty and sketchy. It's low fidelity prototyping. But from this, we were able to have a much better conversation about what it is that the tool actually was, what the solution was, and why certain things were working versus not. And so I'm going to stop sharing my Miro here and have Eddie go back to the presentation. I want to make sure that we have time to hear from our stakeholder herself, Dr. Jenny Lentz. And Eddie, if you wouldn't mind sharing the screen, if we can just talk through some of the benefits that we discovered of going through this process. Actually, why don't I go ahead and share my screen? I don't know if you're still there, Eddie. So some of the benefits that we discovered is that it really does work with teams of all levels. It sounds kind of like easy to say, but the fact of the matter is that we were able to accomplish an incredible amount with just a few, with a volunteer team that actually, in truth, they had never created a product before. And so we weren't sure how this was going to turn out, but it was pretty amazing. And we were able to explore the problem space and test ideas by creating that prototype without long lead time. So, I've worked on a lot of projects where it takes like 20, 30, 60 days to come up with a prototype. We did this in 10. And you just saw how low fidelity it was, but it was enough to keep the conversation going. You also discover features and best practices and approaches so that you can really focus your effort on what's needed and useful, meanwhile holding on to and parking all of those other ideas that you have for future phases. You receive consistent feedback, again, from different experts, from your stakeholders, and from users that help guide the overall direction, and tangible outcomes we mentioned, and something that's tested. And I think that's really critical, because you can have a small team that has all of the greatest ideas in the world, but if you don't get a chance to really try it in the real world and get some feedback from actual users, you never really know sort of what blind spots you've had and what you might have missed. Okay, so with that, I'm just going to play for you what Dr. Jenny Lentz had to say about the experience. Let's see if it'll play.
Hi, I'm.
Okay, just get it to work. Hold on one second. Let's try one more time.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Lentz. I am the program manager at Coalition for Clean Air. As part of my role, I oversee a number of projects, including our air quality monitoring network, which has low-cost sensors throughout California. I also work with schools to get air quality monitoring programs into classrooms so that students can better understand their local air quality and also come up with their own hypotheses and experiments regarding air quality. I also work with a number of disadvantaged communities to better understand the impacts that their air quality is having on them and their health, and work with them in a way so that they can become advocates with their local legislators to improve their conditions. So I handle a number of projects in various realms, but they all tend to deal with air quality. Going into this project, I honestly didn't have very high expectations. When I heard that it was a 10-day sprint with made up entirely of volunteers, I wasn't expecting much. I had participated in numerous hackathons over the last many years, and I usually ended up feeling at the end of them that they were a waste of time, that the finished product wasn't really going to be usable for anything. This experience completely changed my view of that. I had been clear that
I'm getting a notice that perhaps you guys are not actually seeing that. And I just want to make sure you
Hi,
are
I'm
able to see
Jennifer
that.
Lentz.
So I'm just
I
gonna
am the
try
program manager at
that again. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully you guys can now see that.
Coalition for
You
Clean
already
Air.
did hear her speaking a bit, so I'm going to see if I can. Nope, we're going to have to play the whole
Part
thing.
of my role, I oversee a number of projects, including our air quality monitoring network, which has low-cost sensors throughout California. I also work with schools to get air quality monitoring programs into classrooms so that students can better understand their local air quality and also come up with their own hypotheses and experiments regarding air quality. I also work with a number of disadvantaged communities to better understand the impacts that their air quality is having on them and their health, and work with them in a way so that they can become advocates with their local legislators to improve their conditions. So I handle a number of projects in various realms, but they all tend to deal with air quality. Going into this project, I honestly didn't have very high expectations. When I heard that it was a 10-day sprint with made up entirely of volunteers, I wasn't expecting much. I had participated in numerous hackathons over the last many years, and I usually ended up feeling at the end of them that they were a waste of time, that the finished product wasn't really going to be usable for anything. This experience completely changed my view of that. I had been clear that I didn't have much time, and they had set aside, I think, 3 50-minute windows a week for 2 weeks. And I was nervous that beyond those 50-minute windows for the meetings that I was going to need to spend a lot more time answering questions and doing work, and I didn't have spare time to do it. But at the end of it, the only time I spent was in those 50-minute meetings, and I don't know that I've ever had a more productive 50-minute meeting. I could see my comments being incorporated into the product in real time during those meetings, and by the end of the 10 days, the prototype they showed was exactly what I had envisioned before the project started. So I was blown away by the whole experience. So going into this project, I had a vision of what I wanted the outcome to be, but it was hard to describe that to coworkers. I would try and show them similar examples, but it didn't quite fit what my vision was. And I would try and explain why we needed this dashboard and what it would accomplish for us. And without being able to show them something, it was really difficult to communicate that message. But at the end of the 10-day sprint, the prototype was something that I could actively share with coworkers, our board. In our last board of directors meeting, when I was updating them on my programs, I went through the protocol with them step by step, showing them that when this becomes a finished product, what it would be capable of and how we could then expand. We have an air quality monitoring network, and this dashboard would be used to facilitate downloading the data, calibrating the data, analyzing the data in a much more streamlined and efficient manner than is currently possible. And it would enable us to not just have this air quality network of all these sensors that we can look at in real time, but we could actually use this dashboard to access the historical data, download it, and really start to drill in and answer some pretty interesting questions about air quality over time and different patterns in different areas. So having that finished protocol or prototype where I could really just show our board and our staff what this could do is really quite exciting. And they all got very excited about it as well.
All right, I know that I'm probably right at the edge of time. I do want to leave some time for questions. I don't know if there are any. Eric, are there any questions that have come through?
Yeah, hey, we do have a few questions. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Great. So first question is from Renee. It says, could you send us a link to the Miro board? I would love to see it in more detail.
Yes, I'd be happy to share that with you. If you could just leave your contact information in the, let's see. If you guys want to contact me directly, that might be a little easier. You can reach us at hello, HELLO, at collectivefuture.com. And I'd be happy to share that link with you. Eric, are there any other questions?
Yes, great. Thank you for that. Next question is from Wesley. He says, it's not clear if everyone was working full work days, but you accomplished a lot. Can you talk a little bit about the mix of volunteers and paid team members?
Yes, it was 100% volunteer team, myself included. So D4G doesn't have a lot of budget at the moment, and neither did the Coalition for Clean Air. And actually, that was part of the last thing I was going to share with everyone. It's that D4G has an idea lab, and part of what we're exploring right now is looking at how we can sponsor different kinds of projects that have a great need to be created and that also serve a larger public good. And so if you have a project like that, you should reach out to us and, just sort of initiate a conversation. In terms of our daily schedules, so it happened over the course of 10 days, and the time that people spent was anywhere from 2.5 hours to 5 or 6 hours a day. So it was very, I would say it was really generous in the amount of time that people had off. And so that's why I mentioned we also have a version that is a 6-day. It's a little bit shorter in terms of how many total days you're spending doing it, but the days are a little bit longer. And part of the reason for that is sometimes you have a group of people that have a number of other projects that they're working on, particularly if they're working a full-time job or something like that. And so that's why we created it over the course of 10 days to accommodate people's schedules so that they could get other stuff done. But we do have a condensed version, which is 6, where you're primarily just working on this project. But even then, it's not even a full day. So I hope that answers your question, Wesley. If you have any other questions around that, please feel free to ask a follow-up. And we are always, Data for Good is always looking for volunteers. So if you, again, if you know somebody or if you feel like you would love to work on one of these projects, please let us know, because that's how we're currently accomplishing everything.
Great, thank you for that. Next question is from Anthony. These rapid design sprints, is it 10 calendar days or 10 business days?
It's 10 business days. So we worked from Monday to Friday for 2 weeks. And yeah, it's always business days. Having said that, if for some reason you and your team wanted to look at exploring having the work done in a different way over a different period of time, that can always be done. I'd say we could always shorten the amount of time, but we would never really want to extend it, because the compactness and kind of the concentration of work over that 5 to 10 day period is really what allows that work to get done, I think, with a lot of momentum. So I wouldn't really consider expanding it out. If anything, I would consider condensing it, and that could happen over a weekend if needed. If the team for some reason needed to, wanted to explore doing it in that way. But in general, it is business working days.
So it looks like we're 1 minute at time. I just want to say thank you so much. Ronnie, do you want to leave us with any lasting thoughts or impressions on this talk?
I'm just going to leave you with this last screen here in case anyone does want to get in touch. And so that way you just have you have our contact information. So again, Collective Future, you can reach us at hello@collectivefuture.com, or if you're interested in learning more about D4G, Data for Good, you can reach us at info@d4g.community, or you can contact Subhash directly even. I don't know if his contact information is out there, but he is very much part of and a presence during this DataCon conference. So I hope that was informative, and that you guys learned what rapid sprints are and what can be accomplished in just a short amount of time. If you have any questions, or if you're interested in learning more, or you'd like to receive that link to the Miro board, please feel free to contact me, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate all of you, joining this session to learn more about what we went through in this project. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ronnie, and thank you, Eddie, for your presentation today. And I appreciate all the attendees for the questions and interactions during the session. Please contact the speaker if you have any further questions. You have their contact information. Please provide any comments and feedbacks you have to us or to the organizers on the community board, or to start a discussion there, to connect with others at DataCon LA 2020. We're always taking feedback. This is our first virtual conference. Thank you all again. Have a wonderful day. And thank you for being a part of this year's DataCon LA.
Thank you. Bye.